All right. So let's do a very quick introduction of each of our lovely comic artists here. As I have been introduced, I am Connor Good. I'm going to be the moderator for today. You may know me from the internet as Karmada Arts, and I wrote a book about how to make cosplay. And I like to talk about and draw comics. And our first person, heading down the line.
Me too. I love comics.
Yay.
Imagine that. Wow.
I apologize. I also forgot to follow along. My pronouns are he, they.
Can you hear me okay? Because I can take off the mask, but okay. We're so good. All right. I'm Jayne. I use she, her. I make comics. You can even see them here. They're upstairs. I'm not there, though. I'm here. Please go now. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Nick Stellanova. I use he, him pronouns, and I also comics. And my books are also upstairs, and I like to write about trans people doing their own thing.
Awesome. My name is Anne Haddox. I use they, them pronouns. I'm based in Detroit, and yeah, I draw comics as well as do fiber art and a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So yeah, glad to be here with everyone today.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so I think I'm going to have everybody start and give us the, as I like to call it, the short elevator pitch of your work. The like 1 or 2 sentence describing what your comics that you do are.
I thought about this when I sat down, but like I'm first.
Well, we could start at the end and go this way. Yeah, let's go at the end and we'll go this way.
All right, I got you.
We'll switch it up. I'm okay with that. I understand completely.
So mostly I draw autobiographical comics, so kind of slice of life, just really based in my experiences. I got started in college with my undergrad thesis called Gender Comic, which was me convincing the academy that I could draw comics for my degree. And it's about gender and coming of age. And then I've branched out and touched on other aspects of identity as well in my work. I also edit a queer erotica zine called SQUiRT, and that's been really fun too. I've contributed some comics to that, as well as just taking submissions from folks all over the world.
The comics I like to make are mostly trans and mostly queer, and I like to focus on interpersonal relationships, nature, interactions with characters in the world, and just kind of messed up stuff sometimes.
So you're not going to believe this. I make some queer comics, but yeah, mostly what I'm most well known for are my trans slice of life comics. I'm starting to get into sci-fi comics more because I'm really interested in kind of the mundane life of people in sci-fi worlds that are like homosexuals. I don't know. Guys, I'm so tired. I'm gonna get weird.
It's been a long day.
It's been a long day. Basically, the stuff I'm doing going forward is mostly like, given X sci-fi concept, what dyke drama comes out. It's a very fruitful pursuit.
Yeah. If you haven't seen Emma's book Lesbian, right? LSBN.
LSBN.
LSBN. Yes. It's really cool. You should definitely check it out.
Well, thank you. I'm not allowed to say that because it would be crass, but it would be super cool if you did that.
I'm glad to know how to pronounce the title now, because I did earlier gesture over to your table and say lesbian without any sort of context, and my wife looked at me like, what are you talking about?
Okay, so there used to be, usually I would have periods after every letter, but then it looked kind of on the logo, so I removed them, and it's caused much consternation. There's also a lot of people who think the S is a Z. I really should have workshopped it a little more, but
I think it works.
I think even if the
Yeah.
periods were there, I would still mess it up somehow because I have a hard time reading.
yeah, it's like when people just say lesbian, it kind of feels like I made all this work to make this really stupid joke, and you're just taking off the mask and hitting
You're
the punchline
bypassing my
directly.
good joke.
I don't know why I thought like it would be like, oh, what do these letters mean? What do I say? I'll say them out loud now. It sounds like I don't know. What were we talking about?
Sorry.
We were talking about the different variety of works that all of you do, but I was going to head towards the next question. In regards to your process of how you come up with the different ideas for your topics, for your comics. For example, like if someone in the audience here happens to be an aspiring comic person or a comic creator at this time and would want to make their own comics that are queer-based or queer-related or queer-adjacent in that way, what kind of sparks your journey in a way into making said comics? Like, where do you get your stories from? Are they just yours? Are they other people's? What kind of, I guess, flame kind of ignites? Not to make that a terrible joke, I just realized. When you start your writing process.
Oh, which way are we going now?
It's you. It's all you this time. Yeah.
I deserve this.
One day I'll get to start if I can
Yeah.
think fast
Next
enough.
question. Yeah.
We should get little buzzers, like on Jeopardy.
This is, you should not take advice from me. So for my book, Trans Girls Hit the Town, the whole thing existed as an excuse for me to make the pun Mark Muffalo. And then, like, I had to make an entire comic to have that be a thing that comes up. And then people really liked it. And now I just have a book that says Mark Muffalo. Man, that's not great. I think a lot of, well, especially since I started with sci-fi stuff, I feel like there's a lot of stuff I consume, and especially with sci-fi, I'm like, this could be so much better if it was trans. Like, there's so much body stuff, I guess. I really also like body horror. I don't think that's unique amongst trans people. I think that's actually pretty common, but I don't know. Bodies are weird. It's scary to have a body, especially when you're trans. So, like, there's weird fleshy monster stuff. It's like, yeah, same. I don't know. It's weird. Bodies. That really did answer the question. If you're going to start comics, please start small. I would say small and something you know, I suppose, because if you try to start out big, you are going to burn out and you will feel so bad. And also, I guess for something that you would be really motivated to stick with and finish, it could be something you think is hot. I mean, that could help. But you do you. I'm not your mom.
I would say the way that I start my comic process in the idea phase is like I use a lot of it to work through stuff that I'm already thinking about. Like my very first like full comic I made was for art school capstone project, and it was my thought process was basically, I have a lot of anxiety surrounding death. Why don't we make a comic about that? And then I did, and it made me feel a lot better because I was like, oh, right, I worked this out in my head. Things are a little bit better, but I'm still anxious. So the way I go about most of my comic process is I take like a smaller idea of like, I'm thinking about being trans and how the fact that I wish I was someone different extends past my transness into my insecurity. And then I was like, what if I made a whole 100 pages of that, but they were a computer program, and also able to manipulate machinery. That's it. I also think you should start small because that's just a good idea. And it will be good to decide if you actually do like drawing comics, because that's a lot different than thinking about drawing comics.
I think people underestimate the fact that comics is such a grind.
Yeah. I'll say, like Nick, sometimes I use comics to work through something that I need to process, although that can also happen like years later. I'll come back to something because I wasn't ready to write about it at the time. But aside from that, the two things that sort of spark my process are, one, external motivation, such as having a deadline to an anthology and wanting to contribute something and being like, yeah, I could write a story on this theme. Yeah, there's no shame in like writing prompts or things like that at all. And two is like filling in the gaps of what I don't see represented out there. So I could have said this earlier when Connor asked about our like themes, but polyamory is also something that I write about and have a zine upstairs that's sort of about like coming to terms with that and starting to explore. And that's something that I don't see like represented a lot. So I try to, like Emma said, something that I know, and where can I like share that expertise and be the representation that I don't see.
Good, good. All right, so kind of along those lines, bringing up that looking to fill those like gaps in spaces that you are not seeing stuff that you want. How do you feel about like queer comics publishing at this time? Are we hitting kind of like a boom? Is it a beginning of a golden age? Are we hitting problems? What are your feels on that?
You get to go first this time.
Yay. From what I have seen in the like comics publishing scene, it feels as though there's certain fields that are more represented than others, especially in terms of like trans narratives. Obviously, a lot of trans narratives follow certain checkpoints in mainstream publishing, at least. I've found that independent publishing or small and indie press, there's a lot more freedom to tell the kind of stories that trans people want to tell, more so than the stories that are digestible for a larger audience, like a larger marketing audience or whatever. And that it's easier to find the stories that I'm looking for in small press. And mainstream publishing is just kind of a weird time, just in general.
Yeah, I've really only ever engaged with self-publishing, even. So not even not even small press for me. I am my own publisher. But yeah, I would agree with Nick that like it's easier to find those stories that I'm looking for, either creating them myself or finding other similar narratives in the like self-publishing or small press world.
This is going to be a boring answer. It's going to be very similar.
That's okay.
But yeah, indie presses are basically where I'm seeing the queer work that I really want to see. So for more mainstream comics, it's not that there's nothing. I think a lot of the like big two stuff, it just seems kind of like transness is there, but it's not like it feels like any of the trans people I know. It's just kind of checkboxy, I guess, like you said. And another problem with publishing queer stories for like larger, not strictly superhero stuff presses is just because of how risk averse the comics industry is in America specifically. There's very much a limited kind of queer comic you can make. Like, basically, they want to find another fun home. And fun home is great. But not everything has to be like a queer memoir where people explicitly take you through their lives of being queer, but it's, I don't know. There's this rich world of fiction that we can also explore. But yeah, independent publishing is basically where that stuff can happen.
Yeah, and another one, I know I already gave one book recommendation this panel, but my friend Sam Sabo just came out with Enlightened Transsexual Comics through Silver Sprocket, and that's a sick book. So
Best book ever, in my opinion. I love Sam's work.
It's a great book. So yeah, the small press vibes are definitely where it's at.
I'm like super biased. I shouldn't say this, but Silver Sprocket, excellent stuff. It feels like every other book they put out is by the smartest trans mask person I've met in my entire life, and they're so talented. But yes, disclaimer, they also put out my book, so take that with a grain of salt or whatever.
Can I speak a little bit more on this question?
Absolutely.
I also wanted to say, in terms of trans representation in the comics publishing, I feel like indie press and self-published works are getting more to what I find more interesting about trans stories, which is taking characters not only as trans characters, but trans characters who either their transness is a part of them, but not the whole of them, or there's just a lot more interesting stuff happening, and their storyline doesn't focus on, I guess, the traditional narrative that you see in more mainstream publishing and media. I guess that might have been a reiteration of what I said, but there's so much interesting stuff coming out of small press and indie and self-publishing these days. Like, even if you just look around upstairs, there's so many trans people doing stuff up there.
Well, that was actually going to be my next question, in a way, to all of you in regards to like your works and other works that you have seen. Is in the queer comics world, is there, because I've seen a lot of where it's like, okay, here's my comic, here's my personal experience with becoming this or realizing I'm this, or here's my story of dealing with this. Is there now more of a movement towards, okay, now I can tell a story and my character is trans, or my character is gay, or my character is a lesbian, or they're polyamorous, or whatever they happen to be, and it's just naturally there in the story. How do you see that? Is that an evolution that we're heading towards, or are people still resistant and more hanging on to the memoir side of it?
Can I start again?
Yeah. Because you were kind of on that topic, so I was curious.
Yeah, I'm like, I have some thoughts about this. It's, for me at least, that was my personal experience where I started doing like diary comics, memoir type stuff, and then I was like,
because it's not that those are bad.
No, it's not.
Because they're great.
But I feel like a lot of artists that I have seen who start off that way then go on into fiction because they feel like they've either said their piece about their personal life, or they realize they don't want to be known as that, just as that. I know a lot of people who have done memoirs and or diary comics that then feel kind of boxed into that, whatever they've portrayed themselves as. And for me, doing those autobiographical comics gave me the opportunity to be like, okay, now I can do the fun stories where everything's wacky. And I don't have to be so sad about it. It might be a general trend. I'd say I'm seeing more and more of that. But it's also, I think, has to do with like the personal place you're at per artist.
I was gonna say, any thoughts from either of you, or you don't have to if you don't want to.
Yeah, I'll say I do think that those like coming out stories and like the more memoir stuff is always going to be really important. And my partner who's helping me table today was saying like I was sort of explaining to her like I think this one zine that I've done has kind of like run its course. Like I'm not sure if I'll print this again. And she was saying just because like you've spoken your piece like doesn't mean that it won't reach somebody else who like needs it at this next moment or next year or the next fest. So that kind of made me rethink if I will print more. But yeah, I think it is also interesting to get to branch out, and as somebody who largely does autobio, I can kind of feel that trajectory coming on of like, oh, am I going to explore something in a different direction? Yeah.
The pause had a lot of build-up. Sometimes I think too much before I speak, but that's okay. You all got me. Now I forgot what I was going to say. Damn it. Yes. So I feel like I am not the right person to ask about autobio just because I'm a very private person, which is a weird thing to say when you're up on a little podium and stuff, but I don't know. I don't want people to know what's going on in my personal life. You might judge me. Okay, that's not why. But I don't know. I don't think that means my work or people who only do fiction. I think the difference is narratives are being informed by your life without being a literal depiction of them. So when I made Trans Girls Hit the Town, something that I wanted to do was something I'd rarely really seen, in that kind of acknowledging the fact that there can be multiple trans people who know each other. Because frequently it was just like, here's the one trans person we know, and we love them.
Wait, are you trans? Me too.
What?
No, I'm just like a fan.
Oh. Yeah, I'm a fan of trans.
I've written
Dang.
I've
I was gonna
written
make a
multiple comics about trans people just because I think they're pretty neat.
Me circa 2017 before coming out.
Yeah, you got plenty of those like allies who are incredibly enthusiastic in a way where it's like, all right, I'll check back in 2 years. We'll see if
Be
you've
like,
started
"All right."
doing hormones.
I just want to see. I just want to
Honestly.
know.
I'm not saying like, obviously, I'm not going to tell people how to live their lives, but sometimes like I'll go to a comic show and I'll be like, the amount of people in this room that are going to inject estrogen into their thigh for the first time within like the next calendar year. The ratio is astounding. And I have no way to know if I'm right, but the vibes are there.
So that will lead to the next question I kind of have on my list here. Ironically enough,
Impressions.
is that one that was kind of suggested was, do queer like zines and anthologies and books like that, like where it's very obvious it's like, oh, this is a queer story. Do you think that they have a limited readership, or have you found that it kind of branches into like anyone and everyone will pick them up?
That's actually kind of surprising, because when I just feel like I'm name dropping my own stuff all the time, but whatever.
It's okay. You're allowed to talk about your own things.
I'm very humble.
I understand it's difficult. I have the same problem. You can
I'm
talk
from the
about your projects.
Midwest. Yeah, when I made Trans Girls Hit the
I
Town.
need a squirt bottle. Just be like, it's okay.
Sorry. When I made it, I like almost didn't, just because I felt like, oh, the people who will relate to this, like, I don't know, they already know this already. Not that it was supposed to be an informative book, but it's just like, oh, it'll be like, well, this is my life, I don't care. Or it would be like, wow, this has nothing to do with my life, I don't care. Whereas it turns out it was like basically the opposite. I've been really surprised by how many people who are not trans have come up to me and be like, thank you for making this. You've helped me understand my trans sibling a lot better. And I don't know, it's really sweet. And I have to resist the urge, like picking a scab, being like, I didn't make this for you. I don't actually do that. I don't even think it, but it's once in a while I have. I want to be like, I want to be so inaccessible to people who aren't trans, but that's stupid. Very charismatic. Continue.
Like you said earlier, you never know who's going to turn out to be trans in a year, so watch out.
There's also that, yes.
I don't remember what the question was.
Oh, it was, hold on, let me try and remember how I
The
phrased it.
readership.
Do you have a limited
Right.
readership, or is it just like anyone and everyone comes and buy and picks up your stuff? Or is it like generally surprising who will come by and pick up the queer books at your table?
It's hard to tell if like it's mostly queer people or trans people picking up the stuff, or if it's people who are on the fence about it, or if it's just some really supportive parents who buy my stuff, because that also happens a lot.
Yeah, it can be hard to like read people.
That's
For
fair.
sure. But no, I would say I think it doesn't have a limited readership. I don't think at all. Like, I do think that more people want to pick up my erotica zines than actually pick them up. It's okay. Don't be scared. It's not going to bite you. But no, I think I get all sorts of customers at my table, and I think that I'm really grateful for that, because I think that anybody who's not or not yet part of the queer community definitely has like a lot to learn from queer and trans folks, and so I'm glad that it can be like more widely distributed. The question I thought you were gonna ask when you started this question was like, are zines queer? And I was like ready to answer that question, so you know.
Well, we can have that question. Are zines queer?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
hoping you'd say that.
Definitely, for sure. I'm claiming it. We own
part
them.
of- part of the
Yeah.
history.
Yeah, absolutely.
For those who don't know the history of zines, they were the underground creativity. Oh man, I did a whole panel on the creation of like zines and their history, but basically they were like fan-made journals that people would give out with like quote controversial things inside, and a lot of it, if not most of it, was queer topics. So, yes, I agree.
Great. I'm glad we covered that. Yeah.
Yes, very important history to know. So I'm going to have one more question that's solid from here, and then if anyone in the audience has questions they would like to ask, we will then open up the floor. So I have a question here. Are there any sort of unique challenges facing like queer publishers that you would point out or that you feel are happening? Or even know that are happening, I should say. That make it difficult to get, like if you're going to a publisher or trying to get something published or put something in a store or anything like that, is there, or even on like a website, get something printed, have there been difficulties or any sort of issues getting queer material?
I can start this one if you want.
Sure.
With the erotica zine SQUiRT that I do, yeah, it's like very difficult to sell
I
online.
had a feeling.
That's why I come to so many in-person fests, or that's part of why. Yeah, there's so many rules around that, and I'm just like the tip of the iceberg in terms of like sex workers online who encounter so many barriers to doing those types of sales. interestingly, I can sell a few of the issues on some platforms because of their like specific rules, but not issue number 4. So you should buy that from me today if you want it. Yeah, that's what I'll say about that.
One thing I will say is nice about working in independent publishing is that it's typically small enough that the banned book crowd like hasn't even heard of us. So there's comfort in that.
I haven't experienced a lot of trouble getting my stuff out there and or like selling it because I just don't really have an online presence as much as I should.
That's okay.
I don't like it there
Online is a terrible place sometimes.
all of the time. But in terms of in-person stuff, you do get the odd person come up to your table and start to harass you about your content and if it's appropriate for people. So that is definitely something to be aware of if you are selling in a like public setting. Like people can just come up to you and start talking to you, and it's perfectly okay to disengage or like just turn around if they're being super weird. Which is what I've started doing, I guess.
All right. Does the audience have any questions for our illustrious authors here? Oh, okay. We have a microphone up here specifically for questions.
And line up to the microphone.
Oh, look at that.
You didn't make it fall asleep. Hello. I just wanted to ask where your table was upstairs.
Oh, it's that's a great question. I don't know how to describe that to you at all.
Can I have your name so I can look up the thing?
Yeah, my name's Anne Haddox, and
Anne Haddox?
it's like kind of to the right of the welcome table.
Okay, I can work with that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you see the wall that says, I think, teen graphic novels or whatever, it's the one, it's like the chunk of tables on that side.
I'd just like to pull the board. Does anyone here have a favorite monster and why?
Wow.
Oh, duh. Sorry, there's just, my entire table is plastered with ghosts.
And
I've-
why is that?
They're just really cute, mostly. I'd like to think there's some deep psychological reason, like, it's because my transition was a process of death and rebirth and coming back from, no, they're just like really cute. Have you seen them?
They're great, yeah.
Just little guys.
I don't play favorites.
We see you and we hear you.
I love them all.
I don't have a favorite monster at this time, but your question is something I'm going to be sitting with for a while. So,
And to you? Do you have
I'm
any-
Team Ghost,
Okay.
as you can see from my hat.
Well, that makes. I thought that was a shark eating your head. I must
Oh.
confess.
He's a little screaming. He's a little screaming ghost.
Well, thank you all for your time.
Museum of ranking
I relate to
monsters,
that,
perhaps?
yes.
yeah, perhaps. Oh, actually, I changed my answer. Keanu Reeves is my favorite monster. Thank you.
Hello. I was wondering for the people who have mentioned science fiction type stuff, if you have any like queer, trans science fiction stuff to check out, because that stuff is awesome.
Uh-oh.
My book's kind of science fiction.
Yeah, mine too.
What are your books called?
The Dazzle. It's about a computer programmer who tries to create his perfect self, and then his perfect self is trans, but not in the direction he was hoping for.
Ominous.
Also, Emma Jane's book, LSBN.
We had an extended conversation about its pronunciation earlier in this very panel.
I learned a lot.
There's
Say, come by and be confused by its title. Enjoy the insight.
it's an enigma. There's
It's very pretty.
Very cool. Thank you.
and this isn't science
Where
fiction.
where is everyone's tables, by the way?
Well, I already played this game.
Yeah,
yeah,
we
I
already
played
heard
this
from
game.
yours. Vaguely in the direction.
Back corner, one of them.
All right, I
There's
am
only so many corners.
literally the first table on your right when you walk in. They told me I'm table number 1, and I'm trying not to let it go to my head.
If you find that table, mine's 2 to the left.
And mine is like if you look longingly across the hall from Emma's table.
Yeah, just like if you go to my table, face out, and you just follow the yearning of your heart and reach, your
Yeah.
hand will go in that direction.
Yeah, that's right.
I think there's also like a pillar somewhere in there.
It's possible.
Maybe.
There's a few pillars floating around.
Yeah.
Oh, floating?
They gotta hold the top up somehow.
Yeah.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? Oh, yeah, come on up. Come on up, join us.
The microphone yearns to know what you wish to tell.
I
lot
feel
of
bad because
yearning
my
happening.
question is so boring. Well, not boring, but serious, and everyone's was so fun. I'm wondering what you guys feel is the role of not only queer art in comics, but your queer art in comics in the world today, and all the things that we're living through right now that are not so great, and just what would you want your work and other queer work to bring to queer readers? Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. To me, at least. But I have to think about it.
Then I will speak. It actually kind of hasn't changed very much for me personally, just because, I don't know. I guess what transphobic people want is the opposite of what I've always been doing anyway, I suppose. Like, I'm just wanting to depict the lives of everyday queer people, and I don't know, my latest book has branched into explicit sexual content, which I was like nervous about, but I also had this feeling like, I don't know, the people who will hate my stuff for being queer will hate it if it's the most chaste thing in the world, so, you know, might as well lean into it.
I definitely agree with that in the sense that people who are already transphobic are probably not going to be swayed one way or the other by my work. So I just want to make something that makes a queer person or a trans person or just someone, I want it to make them either happy, seen, or maybe a little confused.
Yeah, I think I want my work to resonate with queer readers, like Nick said, and maybe challenge folks at times too to step outside their own, perhaps limited perspectives.
Yeah, and I guess as an extension of that, I think it is important to me to show trans people, like trans women specifically, as like, I don't know how I can say this without it sounding weird, but like sexual people, because there is this presumption of predation about trans feminine people, and like it makes it hard to engage with the topic of sex when you also have to like go through this filter of fear of, will people think I am a predator for like no reason because of Silence of the Lambs or whatever the hell. I need to stop tapping this table. I gotta stop hitting the panelists.
I had my elbows out really wide,
That's okay.
so oops.
It is all good. Are there any other questions from the audience? Come forward.
I thought I would sit because that one sounded a little deeper, so it needed a moment. I have kind of a twofold question, but they relate to each other. When you are looking yourself for new, fun, queer content for yourself to enjoy, what kind of places do you look for that when it comes to like comics? And on the same side of that, when you are looking to publish fun, queer comics, how do you find good independent presses that you want to read more from or that you want to publish more from?
This is hard to say because unfortunately I'm just like, I turn around and look at my friends because I know a lot of other queer cartoonists, but I worked with Descat Press before, who's local. They were committed to putting out just a bunch of really cool, intimate queer stuff. And they've kind of been, I won't get into the studio trouble, but since then I moved to Silver Sprocket, and they've also been incredibly good about putting out a bunch of queer stuff. Those are like the only ones that come to mind off the top of my head that there's a high concentration of queerness. I think a lot of it just has to do with like going to shows and just seeing where the action is, as it were.
I usually just come to events like these and look around because there's usually at least 10 to 20 queer people in the room. I don't know why, but I also go to a lot of queer specific shows. Like in certain places you will find like tabling events that are specifically queer oriented. And that's a great place to start because you just have so much to choose from, and you will most likely find something that you are interested in. As for publishing, I just kind of go down little rabbit holes, and I'm like, I like this webcomic. Someone published it. It's pretty queer. Did they publish anything else queer? Yeah. Do they know anyone else queer? Who published them? A lot of clicking on people's websites, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, and this is not a hard and fast rule, but if you go to a comic show and like see a mullet, I don't know, take a look. I don't know, you'll find lesbian stuff that way, I guess.
What was it?
Usually.
Well, there's a line in a new, actually, Sam Szabo comic that says, I always admired lesbians, all those haircuts. And it really resonated with me.
They go for it.
Yeah.
They do.
Look for the haircuts, I
Look
guess.
for the haircuts.
No, yeah, definitely going to your local zine fest. That's not always accessible, of course, and sometimes for some of the good ones, or like especially good ones, you have to travel. But I will shout out like Detroit Zine Fest, which will be coming back at the beginning of April, is an awesome spot to find new publications. Also, if there's not a Zine Fest in your area, maybe you could start one, just saying.
It's only so much work.
It's a lot of work to organize a Zine Fest, but it can be really rewarding too to see everyone coming together. And then, yeah, the other publisher that comes to mind, I think they're called Iron Circus.
Yes, I was going to suggest that.
Yeah.
Iron Circus does a lot.
Yeah, they do a lot too. I haven't seen some of their more recent stuff, but I have some of their older stuff that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I know Iron Circus Publishing does often have a focus on queer and POC creators. So
Yeah, isn't there? I think there's also a database for one or both of those things. There's like a cartoonist of color and like a queer cartoonist database.
And a disabled cartoonist database.
Yeah.
Great, yeah.
You can find both of them through Mari Naomi's Twitter.
Mari Naomi's information. Okay, awesome. Yeah.
It's great.
And speaking of Iron Circus, they're very soon putting out a book about Wine Ghost, who like may or may not be gay, but she's a ghost, and I like her.
Does she wear high heels? Is that the very same ghost?
That's
I
the very
believe so.
same.
Wow, a celebrity.
She has long, hairy legs, and she wears high heels.
And there's wine.
And this
Yeah.
time she's going to hell.
I've seen images. For some reason, I said that in a way that I'm plagued by them, but I'm not. I just like them.
I can't get away
One
from
last
wine.
call for any more questions. Sorry to interrupt the
Oh,
fun
no, that's
conversation,
okay.
y'all.
That is okay.
Anybody else want to ask a question? Going once, going twice. All right. I have a question then for everyone. In terms of those of us who are looking to create our own comic books, publish it or not, how do you feel? I mean, we talked a little bit about this autobiographical start point. I, as an individual, sometimes feel like, well, this story has been told so many times that it's not worth coming from me. What do you think about that conversation? What do you think pros and cons of starting with an autobiographical comic?
I think the only cons are the ones that you like kind of place upon yourself, because starting with any comic is a good idea to start comics, right? Like, my advice in general for making comics is just start making comics and worry about if you're going to print it or publish it or like it later. Just go out and do it. And for autobio, it's often a really accessible point to talk about the things you're going through. I think that even if someone has said the exact same story before, the way you present it will always be a little bit different, and someone else who did not find the similar work would find yours first. Even if someone tells you it's too similar to something else or anything like that, you still made something. You still made a comic, and that's a lot of work.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you have to make comics for yourself because it's incredibly thankless and it's so much work, and it needs to be something you love because you need the motivation to push through to the end. So, make what you want.
Be very selfish in your creation process and stuff like that. Like,
It can be
Please.
fanfic, You'll
It
probably
often
be
is
more likely to
fanfic.
finish it. Make fanfic, change the characters. Someone was like a billionaire because of it. It's 50 Shades of Grey. We all know this. I don't know. Why are we pretending?
Yeah, I think Nick pretty much said it, but the only thing I would add is just that like everybody has something valuable to say and to add to this larger conversation, and I wouldn't worry too much about like trying to find that exact slice that has never been covered before, but if you do want to do some research in advance of that, like reading comics is a super fun way to do research.
all my business expenses of new books.
Oh yeah, hot tip. If you get into drawing comics, you can start writing that off on your taxes whenever you buy a comic. So think about that. I need to remember to do that.
Save those
All
receipts.
right. Well, thank you so much for your sage advice, and thank you for coming out to the Ann Arbor District Library. It was a blast having you. Let's all give a round of applause for our panelists.
I was gonna clap.